Welcome, everyone, to the Manifest Incredible Love Show. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Erica Goodstone. Welcome, Dr. Erica. Could you give us a small introduction of yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm delighted to be here, and I love the title of the summit. Um, I call myself a healing through love mentor. And somebody recently told me that, people don't need to heal. They're just naturally born a certain way and they are a certain way and just have to get in touch with it. But we really do have to heal all those layers that have blocked us for whatever reason. It starts so young, and we really need to learn about love because so many of us have been blocked in some way. And what we think is loving and what we're attracted to and what we really want is not loving. It's not, you're not receiving the love equally, and it becomes painful. And so I've just seen so much of that. My background is really, it started with wanting to understand myself better. And I got into a doctoral program in human sexuality, marriage, and family living a long time ago. And my dissertation was all about mother-infant bonding and the effects of slightly inadequate bonding, even if it wasn't terrible, but just not good enough bonding. And the child can develop separation anxiety, anxiety about merger or really getting close, and intense ambivalence. You love someone and you hate them, or you only like them for certain qualities and then you don't like the other qualities. And I had all of that. So I went on a quest for a very long time to discover for myself what is love, what do I need, and in the process, I also got into understanding healing and sexuality and many different aspects. There's many parts to healing through love.
Do you mind if I tapped into that a little bit? Because
Sure.
some of the things you said sounds very familiar to my personal story of not feeling nurtured in my relationship with my parents, and that affected how I viewed relationships as an adult, always trying to chase love or being in relationships that didn't serve me, and I just didn't know because I wasn't really taught this at a young age. So when you talk about healing, and that mother child bond, what do you mean?
What do I mean in terms of how to heal it?
uh,
Well, the first thing is recognizing that even though you're in this relationship, that you call it a toxic relationship, and the other person's doing these things wrong and they're not giving you the love that you think you're giving to them, they're just not doing it right. And the trigger or the issue that points out that it's something going on with you is how intensely you react to it. If you find yourself crying and upset and going back and trying to convince them and trying to change them and mad at them and it's all them, that's a clue that, wait a second, it could have something to do with you. And maybe if it's just one time with one person and everybody else has always been loving and it worked, then maybe it has more to do with the other person. But when you start to see that it's happened in several relationships, it's a clue. And it's not just your intimate relationships, like not the person that you're being sexual with and emotionally intimate with. It can be with coworkers. It can be with anybody who happens to trigger that issue in you. And that's when you start to realize how far back it goes. And the other piece of that is that we have these parts of our brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus and other parts in the limbic system that are holding our memories and emotions. So they're stored in there. So we are operating with the prefrontal cortex where we're logical and we're thinking and we choose a partner and say we like this or we don't like that. But when they do something in a certain way, which triggers that memory in our brain, we're off and running. That's the person we fall in love with. And it may not be really loving. It may be because something got triggered from the past. It's just amazing that how much is really in our brain. And I
Um,
actually saw that very clearly when I was studying Spanish. When I first moved to Florida, I was taking lessons in Spanish. And one particular day, I went to say the word for lunch, and it came out in French. I'm trying to say the Spanish word that I was learning, and it came out in French. And I had not studied French for like 20 years. So that's when I realized the words in French were in my brain somewhere in the back of my brain. And when I was trying to say it in Spanish, it's in a part of the brain that's connected because it's languages. So the same thing happens with emotions and with anything else that we're going through. Memories from the past trigger, they come into it and they trigger feelings now. So when you can connect it with what happened in the past, not just intellectually, but emotionally, you can finally come to grips with it and accept it, forgive yourself, forgive the others, and finally be open to giving and receiving love.
Thank you for sharing that. And um, I want to share like a personal example because for the audience who aren't very familiar with the scientific terms that you just shared, when Dr. Goodstone said that your brain triggers old memories. So an example of this for me would be when my mom would not acknowledge my good deeds um, and when I saw that in my personal relationships, like with my adult relationships, something that I was really proud of, and my partner did not acknowledge me, I felt hurt because I felt hurt as a young child that I wasn't acknowledged for it. And so, what I would do in response, when I would try to please the other person because they didn't acknowledge what I was originally doing. So then I would try to please them and I would change my behavior. And in my adult relationships, I would do the same thing, thinking that it was incorrect for me to behave this way because they didn't acknowledge me. Would you say that is a correct representation?
That's a beautiful example because you learn something. That's a good, another aspect of it. You learn to behave a certain way because of the way you're treated. So you just thought it wasn't appropriate. That's why they didn't acknowledge me. They really didn't acknowledge you because of their own issues. That it wasn't that you didn't do something right, but you think it is. So you keep on trying to do something differently. And then somebody says to you, well, you're not authentic. And they're probably right. You're not being authentic because you're trying to please them. And that trying to please, it's wonderful when it's coming from a full understanding of yourself and I'm okay. And I just want you to feel good. But when it's coming from suppressing your feelings and just making nice and doing something to please someone, the end result, it doesn't feel, it's not intimacy. It doesn't feel so good on either side.
It's just not authentic because you're sacrificing a little bit of yourself in order to please the other person. And this is what led to a lot of my disappointments because I had expectations of people to that wanted to show well, expectations of how I wanted to be loved. And when it wasn't reflected back to me, I just ended up overgiving. I just said, you know what? Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I should change my behavior and try to be more like what they want me to be. And this led to a lot of separation, feeling hurt and misunderstood, and just not being true to myself. And I wouldn't communicate properly. So I ended up in a lot of heartbroken situations.
And another part of that is that, and I've said this for a long time, it's much easier to love someone who's difficult and whose love you can't win because you're trying to please them and you're trying to win them over. it's harder to love a person who's just being open and pleasing you and being nice to you, because then you can see all the flaws in the other person, because you're not trying to win them over, and then you see the things that are wrong with them. So that's another part of what happens. And there was a book that I saw many years ago, Why Men Love Bitches. And it really makes sense, because someone who's being bitchy is not worrying about how they're pleasing you. They're just saying, I want this and I demand that, and, take it or leave it. And it's easier to love someone like that, even though you get annoyed and then you want to change them, but it's easier to fall for that, because you look at that as someone who's confident and, sure of themselves. And it doesn't always mean that.
Mhm.
Very often they're just as insecure, but that's how they do it, because so many of us are operating from just not feeling good enough about ourselves from a long time ago, and the parents didn't purposely do it. It's how the interaction happened and how we interpreted it.
It's a psychological response of our understanding. And that's why communication is so important. It's like texting. If I said, no, I can't come over right now, and the other person reads it as, no, I can't come over right now. Like the tonality is different, the way you perceive it is different. And there's a misunderstanding when someone's trying to set a boundary versus someone saying, oh, no, I just can't, right? Um,
But
in
there's another part to that some people just want you to do it whether you want to or not. So
Mm.
they're going past your boundary and they keep pushing you to do something you really don't want to do. And then if you're a pleaser and you're trying to please them, you're going to do it. So they get their way and then they see that works. So it's relationships can be more difficult than we realize.
Can you go into depth about like how we can notice these while we're still in the dating arena? Um,
Well, I have thoughts about focusing on you, that it begins with focusing on you rather than focusing on them. So right from the beginning, to even before you go out with somebody, to think, what do I want? How do I want the relationship to be? How do I want someone to treat me? So ask these kinds of questions. Ask a lot of what questions. Or first of all, start with, who am I? Who am I? What do I like? What do I desire? But who am I as a person? Some of my traits. And who is this other person? Just to understand. And then a lot of what questions. What's my background? What is his or her background? What do I want and need and desire and dream about? And what do they want, need, desire, and dream about? What can I get from the relationship and what can I give? And what does this person want to get? Or what do I think they want to get? And what do I think they can give? And what do I think I can learn? Or what can they learn? Or what can they teach me? And what can I teach them? If you were asking yourself all these kinds of questions, instead of meeting someone and you think, wow, I could learn so much from him. He's whatever he is, so successful. And you just forget about all the rest. What could I teach him? No matter who the other person is, you have a different background and a different way of looking at it, and you can teach some things to that person. But it only happens when you feel strongly about yourself. And then as things are happening, you want to ask things like, what is the purpose of this relationship? What do I really want from this relationship? Does it fit with what I want for my future? If something's going wrong, why is this happening now? Did I do something? Did the other person do something? Am I being too sensitive? It sounds like you're nitpicking, but if you really could do all of this, be like a reporter, like a newscaster who's asking questions and finding out. You don't have to be asking so much, but just thinking it in yourself, evaluating as you go along. So you're not blindsided 3 months later when they suddenly break up with you. If
mm,
you really if you were blindsided in a relationship, you look back over it, there were many red flags. There were many things that went on that you were ignoring or making light of. So if you're really paying attention, particularly at the beginning, that's the best time to pay attention, find out who that person dated before, how they treated these other people, how their family was, just all the different stuff. Did they have a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction or something else? Did they have financial problems in the family? All these things can be really learned pretty quickly before you get emotionally attached.
That's a key word, before the emotional attachment. And awareness is a huge thing. That's something that I've learned personally as well, is asking questions and getting curious instead of having expectations of the other person, and noticing, just like you said, noticing patterns, certain things that you liked or didn't like. Because at the end of the day, it's about what you want, and not about pleasing the other person.
It's really so much is about what you want. So if this other person doesn't match what you really want, not just a material thing, but what you really want, you want a partner to spend time with you and to be loving and affectionate and whatever it is that you want, someone who's successful, someone that will go on hikes with you or play tennis with you, or whatever it is that you want, or if you're into music, whatever your area is. Not that you have to be compatible in everything, but do they have a similar drive and a similar interest? And if you figure that out, then maybe you have a chance for something beautiful, rather than what so many people do is you choose somebody, there's certain things you like, you're sexually attracted to them, maybe the intimate relationship feels good, but there's so much else that's not matching, and they say hurtful things, they flirt with others, they cheat, they do whatever it is, and you let it go and you hurt and you keep trying to win them over and expecting that they'll change, rather than seeing this is who they are. Maybe they'll change, but you have to work with what's there.
Thank you
It's
for
it
sharing
can be
that.
so simple, but it's not easy.
That the working with what's there and not changing the other person, I think that's like one of the more difficult aspects of changing from dating into like being into a committed relationship. Can you share a couple of your recommendations on how to approach a situation like that? Like if you want to be in a relationship with a partner, but there are certain aspects you don't like, but the majority you do like, you do see a future with them. What can we do to help us navigate the relationship when it comes to something we don't like about our partner?
That's a great question. It starts with having, if you've looked through it from the beginning and you really know who this person is, and if you understand where it comes from, that makes a huge difference. If you understand that, like you had said, that you weren't acknowledged early, then you can acknowledge the person. You can give them some of what they didn't get, so that instead of withholding it and making them more uptight and bringing out more of whatever it is. But if they have a certain personality that's volatile and they yell and scream because they grew up in a family where they yelled and screamed, it's pretty likely that you're never going to change that they could be fine. And then something that happens, they're going to get all nervous and yell and scream because that's their style. So you kind of have to say, rather than how could you do this and get mad at them every time they do it, you have to kind of say, that's who he is. And you find a way to protect yourself. Like if that person has a temper, you don't get into it. You say, I'll talk to you later when you calm down, and go out of the room. I saw my friend's mother do that. He was a drug addict and he was having a fit, like screaming whatever he was doing. She just left the room. But
Wow.
he had beaten up his previous girlfriend because she didn't just walk out of the room. She engaged with him. And if someone is like has a temper, you don't want to keep instigating it. So that's just one example. I don't know if it's a good example, but in other words, really know who the person is. And if it's something that you just can't tolerate, like they're embezzling money or they have affairs and you can't stop it, if it's something you can't tolerate, then you have to just end the relationship. You have to let them be. If that's what they need, maybe they can find a partner who has the same kind of need, and it'll be an open relationship. You can't force someone to fit into your lifestyle. But if there's enough there that really matches, and there are some things you really even hate about a person, they're a slob or whatever it is, you have to finally, at some point, just accept it to be with that person. Like like the Alcoholics Anonymous statement to change the things you can, accept the things you cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So life is very simple when you understand the rules, you understand how it works.
That's so powerful because something you just mentioned, the temper tantrums, my husband's the same way. He gets angry and I've learned not to feed into that. Like I just say, it's okay, honey. Like it's okay,
Yeah,
honey. Like it'll be okay because he gets mad at certain things, right?
you
Instead
can't
of saying,
stop that. Or if somebody's very anxious and you say, oh, don't be anxious. You shouldn't be so anxious. It's not important enough. You don't know all the stuff that went on in their childhood, maybe even in the womb, where the mother and father were arguing and the mother's chemicals went into your brain because there was so much anxiety in the mother. You don't know that. So that could be in that person's system. So they're more easily triggered than someone else.
can we talk about that a little bit more in terms of healing healing yourself through love? Because I've experienced changes just reconnecting to love. How does that happen for somebody?
Well, that's also a great question. It's a lot has to do with paying attention and being aware, like feel what's going on in your body. Your gut is considered the second brain, and it has like 50% of the dopamine, which is for excitement and new things and novelty, and 95% of the serotonin is produced in the abdominal area in the gut. So if you're feeling knots in your gut, then you're not going to be able to be loving with your partner. So you have to really recognize when you feel that, and also know that the heart has 5,000 times more magnetism than the brain. So when your heart feels open, you can feel so much more. But if things are happening and you're getting yelled at and you're not being understood and you're feeling a knot in your stomach, tightness in your chest, you're not going to be able to communicate. So one thing that really makes a difference is touch. And
Mm.
if your partner is not touching you at the moment, you're not getting the touch that you need, body therapy can make a huge difference. Going to get a treatment where somebody, a trained person, is touching you. And I trained in a type of body therapy. I've trained in craniosacral and Traeger, a lot of different techniques. But the main one was called Rubenfeld Synergy. And it was a combination of Alexander technique and Feldenkrais gentle body work with Ericksonian hypnosis and Gestalt therapy. So someone would lie on a massage table. They don't get undressed. They just lie there. And so they're ready to get a divorce. They're fed up with the partner. And I'm helping them to let down. The shoulders relax, the back relaxes. And they're talking about all the ways they're going to get an apartment and get out of there. And I've had a couple do that, both of them. Each one was on the table separately in the same way. They were going to get an apartment, they're moving out, they're going to file for divorce. The next week they came in holding hands. And I couldn't get over it, but it was really because all that stuff was pent up in their body. And they were tight and they were thinking this is all bad because everything was tight. But by letting down and connecting the tightness with all the issues and letting it out, all of a sudden they didn't want to get divorced. And I just found that was one example of that. So I haven't done the body therapy during COVID. Since COVID started, I haven't done it, but we're starving for touch. And gentle touch, a session where if you can't find someone who does it with the counseling, just a session where you get touched and get that loosened up. They have these reflexology centers. They're not too expensive. Sometimes it's painful, but you have to ask them to do it more gently then. But even something like that can just be so helpful. And if you can afford other kinds of body therapy, great. But touch is one way. And really understanding what it takes for you to heal. Like we all heal differently. Some people have to really fall apart and cry and get hysterical. Other people can logically figure it out and, maybe they have a few tears, but they don't let it out so deeply, but they can heal. So you have to know how you heal. And it's not simple. So reach out for coaching or counseling. If you really are serious, reach out and go for some sessions to talk out the past. That's what I find with my clients. They're coming in proactively because they want to have a better life. They want to be happier. They're confused in the relationship, so they don't just stay there. They reach out for counseling and try to figure it out. And you can't figure it out yourself very often because you're in a loop in your brain. It's all about the brain, but there's a loop going on. But another person outside of you, especially someone who's qualified and experienced, can make a world of difference to you. And I also have this course that I teach a couple of times a year, and I'm going to teach it again soon. It's called Love Lessons for Your Soul. And it really teaches what love is and what love isn't. And there's so much to understand, like just one of the lessons, money and love. Just that alone is huge. And loss and love. Like we're struggling with so much loss and hurt from before that we don't have enough in the current moment to love. And then all that suffering because you're attached to something and the previous partner did it and now you're hyper sensitive to it. And so there's just so much. It's 30 lessons that it was over 30 days, but now it's over 5 weeks. Give you a little time on the weekend, but it's a beautiful course. And if you're really serious about wanting to heal through love, you have to be proactive. If you wanted to become a professional in any career, you would have to study it. So it does require some studying.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know you have a little special gift for the audience who is attending today. Would you be able to share that with us?
Sure. I have a gift that I created a few years ago. It was really for a summit that was about attraction to dating to commitment. But I realized in there that people also are suffering from a broken heart. And so I created a free gift that if you sign up, you get the free gift right away. And there are a few more that you get in the emails. And another one is this broken heart manifesto. Is a healing manifesto, what to do and how to handle it. And then another one, how to create your own love map so that in advance, you're looking back at all the relationships you've had, starting with childhood, whatever stands out, the timeline of it, and how you felt and when you got triggered, and then what you want. And then it's like your own love map. So it starts with the original one, the first thing that you get is from attraction to dating to commitment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Erica Goodstone, for joining us today. I want to share just a quick takeaway that I've gotten from our conversation today. And the biggest one is being educated about yourself and what you want in love, and being conscious about the choices that you make. And Dr. Erica Goodstone has her courses. So please go ahead and find her link below and make sure to join us on our next episode. We have so many more amazing interviews coming your way. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a wonderful day.